Hey, Sam, you come up with that intro line?
You didn't tell me that was today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writers' Room with Sam and Jim. This is the show where we bring aspiring writers into our writers' room to help them work on and develop their story. And we're going to do that with Adam Warwinsky in just a little bit. But first, I've got something I want to go off about. Sam, are you ready?
I'm ready-ish.
Okay, so Sam, what I was thinking about this week was you and I were just off a show. We're into that uncomfortable spot where we have to figure out, well, what do we do now?
All right, hold on. I hate to stop you in the middle of a rant, but I'm very comfortable right now. Whenever we get off a show, there's a few weeks where I just feel like my whole body's returning to myself, and it's like I start looking at the sunshine. I'm like, oh, look, yes, there's the life out here. Because we were working, 7 days a week for how many weeks at that point?
All of them.
It felt that way. So, okay, yes.
Right?
Okay, so we're in this weird spot.
But we're in this weird spot, and like every time we wind up here, I find us confronting the same question that we were confronting before we ever sold anything to anybody, which is, what do we do now? Do we write something that we feel passionate about, that we really like, that we feel like represents us and our voice, or do we go behind door number 2 and write the thing that people say is sellable right now?
Right.
Do we cater to the market or do we cater to ourselves?
Right. Now, we never cater to the market. For us, if I can just adjust the rubric a little bit, the question a little bit, it's more something that is something we love or something that we are missing in our samples, something that we aspire to write. Like, for example, this last time when we got off, when we were writing, before we started Daredevil, we started working on a space thing because I really want to work on a big sci-fi show. Now, you'd say, oh, we did Daredevil, we've done a lot of Supernatural.
We've never done the big space show.
Well, we've never done the big hard sci-fi show, and I really want to do it. I watch a lot of it, and so you said, all right, fine, I'm in, and we came up with a cool concept, and now we're just about done with it. We keep picking it up, writing it, going on a show, putting it down for a long time, and then, and now...
Doing podcasts instead of working on it like we're doing today.
That's right. Cleaning our house for 6 weeks. No, but and now we're on draft number 27B, and it's pretty good, and it's going to be great. And then what do we do? And so we figured out how to do this, though. I figured out how to do this time. It happened yesterday in my house, or the day before.
Yes, but I guess the point is, I still feel like we're torn between these two choices, because there are things that make sense to do, because, as you say, it fits our suite of samples. It plugs some hole in our resume. But that's not always the thing when we sit there and start talking about shows and we're like, I really wish I could write a show that felt like this. I'd like to write something that talked about that.
Well, and that's what we're doing. Because what I was going to say that I saw was we started talking about an idea of ours, something we've been noodling on for a while, and you got all excited. And, partly we're in a marriage and, you got to make sure that the your partner's happy. But also, if you're excited about something, it's just going to be better. And you and I are past now forcing ourselves to get excited about something that we're just writing on spec.
Well, but I'll go the other way with that, though, because I think any number of times we've chosen to write something or to attempt a development. We've gone in to pitch something or do a pitch an area for something that, that's something, there's a reason why it's with a particular studio. It's a particular piece of IP that we feel is big. There's whatever the reason is that, we should go pitch this thing, where at the end of the day, we're like, is that what we could make a show out of that? But is that really what we want to write? And I guess that's where I'm feeling right now, is that after all this time, we're still butting our heads up against this question of, are we writing for ourselves or are we writing for our career? Are we writing strategically or are we writing from a place of passion?
Let me know when you figure that one out.
I probably never will. Okay, enough of that. Let's get back to the show. Adam, welcome to the show.
Welcome, man.
Thank you.
This is Jim.
This is not Jim. And where are you calling us from, Adam? We kind of ask that sometimes. Where are you where are you?
Right now, I'm in Bozeman, Montana, taking a break from my Winnebago in my sister's apartment.
You rolled up on your sister's apartment in your Winnebago?
Yeah. I rolled up here for Thanksgiving. That was it, to visit her. And then I really liked the town.
Are you like in your sister's driveway in your Winnebago kind of thing?
No, I actually found a ranch outside of town. They have like electric hookup and septic. They were renting a little space out for pretty cheap. Horses outside, very bucolic and kind of idyllic. So that's where I was the last couple of months.
So you're living in the Winnebago.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty of being a writer. Because it just...
That's almost preferable in some ways.
It almost is.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you can go right in a Starbucks anywhere. They all look the same. Or you could be in your Winnebago or wherever.
Yeah.
Ideally, you don't have internet when you're doing it.
Right, and a bottle of Jameson's and a pot of coffee, and what else does a writer need?
That's it.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing.
Jim got me a bottle of whiskey called Writer's Tears.
Oh, I've actually had that. My one of my close friends got me that for my birthday this year.
I think
it's so appropriate. It's not as bitter as you'd expect.
I feel like the Writers Guild should, when you get your card, they should send it to you with one bottle of Writer's Tears whiskey.
Yeah.
All right? Just here you go. Welcome to the club.
I always thought a good retirement plan would be to open a bar. It'd have to be on the west side probably, where your WGA card is required for membership. It's like a writers-only bar.
Wow.
And like all you serve is whiskey. And food. Lots and lots of crappy food.
Your retirement plan is really grim. Mine involves a beach and margaritas.
Well, I didn't say my retirement plan. I said a retirement plan.
Now he's disowning it. I don't blame him.
No, but I did always think it would be cool for there to be a bar in L.A. that you had to have a guild card to get into. Just to have it actually be like it's a writer's bar. Like, that'd be kind of fun.
So let's talk to this writer and pretend that he's here. Okay, so Adam, thanks very much for taking time out and coming and hang out with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
So I asked this question. I think I'm going to keep asking it until Jim tells me I've beat that question.
Jesus Christ, would you stop asking this question?
Right. When I hear those words, I will stop. When I hear those words again, I will stop. But
that's what you say now.
When was the moment when you came out and announced to whoever was not supporting you or did that you wanted to be a writer instead of something reasonable?
Productive.
I always wrote, like high school newspaper. In college, I really enjoyed academic writing. I was living in Cape Town, South Africa after college, and I got involved in these student protests called Fees Must Fall. Basically, the government rose university fees by like 11% in a single year.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Naturally, that's going to like predominantly affect people of color. So I started going to these protests, and I found that I had like two distinct groups of friends at that time. I had my friends who were very active in the protests, in the fight for like decolonizing education, mostly people of color. But then I had my friends who were like mostly white and, like wanted to dance all night and smoke spliffs and hike and surf, which is dope. Like, I love those things. But this like dichotomy, I guess, was hard to stomach. So I came back a couple times and just kind of set up interviews with different folks on like both sides of that spectrum, wrote a pilot. It was that was like the inception, I think.
Was this in South Africa still that you were doing all this?
Yeah.
I don't understand why you didn't go hang out with the surfers and smoking spliffs and just doing that. You clearly have a guilty conscience or a soul. I don't know which.
No, I did both.
Is there a difference?
Don't get me wrong. I did both, and that's where the confliction came from. I did both, and it was kind of like, oh, yikes! This is a kind of an ugly parallel here.
Are we talking about this pilot that you came up with?
No, that's actually not it. I kind of abandoned that.
Good idea. Always good idea to abandon early things. I think, how many did we abandon, Jim?
There's a junkyard. There's a graveyard full of abandoned projects.
Yeah, because you learn something in each one, and then you need to, before anybody might read it, you need to run into your yard, dig a deep hole, put it in the bottom, set them on fire, and then bury them.
And pour a little writer's tears on top.
Yeah. or into you.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think I personally have known a couple different writers who, like, you talk to them and 4 years later they're still reworking the same script.
Mm-hmm.
You're not learning anything from that script at that point.
No.
Like, you need to drop the idea and move on.
In fact, we're on a script right now, and we're on draft 4, 5, 6. And I said to
8, 9, 10.
Yeah, and I said to our agents when they were giving us notes for the third or fourth time, and I said, just tell, if you think we should drop this script, tell me, because we write For everything that actually gets seen or made, we write, I don't know, I mean, even when we're on a show, how many
500 pages for
each script.
60 that wind up published.
Yeah, exactly. It's just you have to let go. So I'm glad you let go. That's a huge thing. It's a home run. I think this is a great call. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks. Good luck. Enjoy the skiing.
You've learned everything you need to know.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So this is a brand new
Different idea.
Different idea.
What you got? What's your idea?
Okay, so originally, now this is like a kind of a second version of it. Originally, I wanted to write something that was like a male version of Girls or Sex in the City. I wanted to see healthy, like supportive male relationships, complex male relationships, something that's funny. But after I wrote that, it seemed a little navel gazing, which it was. So this is a log line for the current draft.
By the way, hold on. That's the second smart thing you did. You had a mediocre idea and you kicked it to the curb before you invested it, months or a year of your life. You are the best not writing guy I know.
Right. Now if you just set aside the writing career and go do something else, you'll really be ahead of the game.
But this is really good. I'm joking, but I'm serious. All right. That was
But he's joking.
Cool. That was really good.
Rad.
Okay, next.
Cool. So this is the log line for the current one. When a gregarious production assistant gets a peek behind the veil of philanthropy at a black tie gala for homeless youth, him and his best friends devise a plan to expose the nonprofit industrial complex, woefully unaware of the titans they're up against.
So here's my main question. Forget about characters. Who cares about characters? What do they see behind the veil? What is the hook?
So the opening scene, it's for homeless youth, and there's this young black kid who's getting prepped to go on and like tell his story in front of a bunch of rich old white people, and he feels uncomfortable. He feels like he's getting used, and somehow the main character gets roped into having to like convince him to do this and convince him it's the right thing to do. He's helping future kids, and he feels dirty as he's doing this. He knows it's gross because he knows he is being exploited, and these old rich white people aren't really paying attention. They're just there to mingle
and drop a check. All right.
And drop a check, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to be defending. Here I am defending but I mean, there's a right. I get it. It's gross in the it's everyone's wants something, and that's why they're there. Okay. And what does he find out?
It's that process for him that feels kind of nasty, and he shares it with his friends at a bar afterwards. And one of his close friends and roommates is like a public defender. And later that night, after like many drinks, he's doing some research into the nonprofit. As of right now, he discovers that like years earlier, the founder was accused of child sexual abuse, but not convicted. And that's kind of when they decide they want to learn more. They want to look into like where the money's coming from. Because there's a lot of large nonprofits, especially in New York, the boards are packed with folks from like Goldman and JP Morgan Chase.
Sure. The interesting thing for me is people buying, they're buying some, not relevancy, but some goodness. They live in these houses. There's no way to look around the fact that if you live in a $10 million, $20 million, $30 million house in New York, you don't deserve it.
So what, like a 3 or 4 bedroom?
Yeah. Yeah, 1.5 bath max. But no, they
pre-war too.
You don't deserve that money. There's no way. I don't know how a good person could think what I have done is worthy of $30 million, but the person that is say the nurse in a hospital, she's worth $80,000 a year or whatever it is. You can feel that. Mm-hmm. There's got to be some guilt or at least some justifying, but that's not the show, right? That's not what you're pitching. You're pitching there's something nefarious happening there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, something nefarious, but also, so when you start trying to get around the troubles of democracy, you're making the troubles of democracy worse. So like, I think that like we are relying less and less on like government change, on legislation. I think that like civic engagement isn't what it is. Yes, I'm a West Wing junkie. I'm sorry.
Who isn't?
But I think that like, yeah, exactly. I think that that's the big message here.
Well, now let's take a breath here. So what you have now is a tableau. You have maybe an angle into a world,
and a clear sort of message agenda that is worthwhile and sort of interesting to approach, but it's it's kind of removed, right? It's intellectual.
And it's very intellectual, not in a bad way. Jim and I are both, we're definitely liberals and very left, but it's political still. And the West Wing, if we get back to West Wing, which my daughter's watching now, and I'm sticking my head in and watching with her. And
It's that one.
It's that one. But was not a political show. That's the crazy thing. I mean, that was the world, that was the tableau, but it was really about each person's journey within that world in the West Wing. I mean, as we all
what is the price you pay to be a true believer in some kind of political cause or purpose?
Right. And everybody was always paying a price or struggling or aspiring or whatever it was, and they could talk about. I remember there's this one element, there's one storyline where Rob Lowe, the Sam Seaborn character, and he was arguing against money for schools. And one of the other characters' daughters, Leo's daughter, who, because it's television, she's super attractive, and Rob Lowe is somewhat attractive, and there's a connection between them. But then he starts spouting all of this anti-education stuff, or maybe anti-taxes for education stuff, and the whole you could say that storyline was because the big twist at the end. Obviously, this is not the A story, B story, or C story. This is the D story, but was no, he's doing opposition research because of course they want more. This administration wants more money for education, and at the end, Rob Lowe gets that speech where he gets to say, no, wait. And she says, wait, you were doing opposition? He said, of course I was doing opposition. Schools should be palaces. They should be this. Right. And he got to have a full Aaron Sorkin diatribe that was gorgeous and righteous and over the top. And it was fun. But the thing about it was the whole time it was about these two people trying to hook up.
But deeply divided by
this issue, which was really not a real issue. And it was a little manufactured. So it still came, this dry idea of more money for education, whoever wrote that, I don't know if that was in the Aaron Sorkin years or later, I don't know. But it was a great little story that got to get all these issues out. So you see where I'm going. What is your little story to get these out so it's not...
Yeah, who do we care about? Why do we care about them as they tackle this problem?
So the main character, the one who who encourages that kid to get up and speak at the event, what he wants more than anything, or what he thinks he wants more than anything, is justice. But what he really needs and wants is affirmation, and he needs people to know he wants justice.
Uh-huh.
There's this kind of he needs people to know he's good, he's moral, he's worthy.
Virtue signaling.
Yeah, exactly. And then his best friend, the one who's a public defender, he's kind of he's a yin to his yang, because he's working on a very micro scale. He's not just ranting at parties after too much beer, maybe a little bit too much Coke. He's actually involved in the tiny micro scale of fighting, the criminal justice system.
Right. He's walking the walk.
Exactly. And these are their best friends because they have the same passion, they have the same drive for social justice, but there's constantly going to be this kind of conflict between them where his best friend is hey, kind of gotta shut up and actually do something instead of just getting red in the face and arguing with people.
Well, it's funny he says that, because that's what I want to say right now, which is what are they doing?
Right. And can you name these two guys for us real quick?
Yeah, so Hunter is the main character. He's white. Krish is the public defender. He's Indian. And then their third roommate and best friend is Aaron, who's also white. And he works in big pharma. What he wants more than anything else is intimacy, but he's a former frat star, and he doesn't, that's not what he professes. Kind of has this tough masculine exterior, but he loves these guys, and deep down he agrees with most of their beliefs, but he's kind of apathetic, and he kind of embodies what they want to go up against.
Right. The inertia of privilege and money, and it sounds good, but I'd just as soon just make a lot of money and be comfortable.
So two questions then now. Okay.
Yeah.
Number one is, so are there no women in this planet that you're setting the show in? And also, so we want to, I bet you if we took one of these characters and made him a woman, that would change very little in terms of where their political beliefs are, but it would change a lot in terms of how they interact, right? And I know you want to probably have women outside of this inner ring, but I think, and I'm not just being politically correct, I think that it'll help a lot if you have in the inner ring as much disparity and as much, what am I looking for, texture and differences as you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Indian American is great. That's interesting. But the other two guys,
you have two white guys. One who's sort of bought into the system, working for Big Pharma, and the other one is virtue signaling and maybe making some noise, but appears to be off topically sort of on the fence at best, and just looking into being good.
Right. Which, by the way, is not. And I'm not piling. I am piling on. I'm sorry. I don't. But that's a little this, little that. Right. We need him or her to have a real, very specific. It can be all these other things, but very specific driver. Something that he or she really cares about. It can't be general. It can't be a little this, a little that, or whatever. It's got to be one thing, and then they can be fully fleshed out. I'm not saying, but we're going to need that one thing because we're going to keep drilling on that, and that's where we're going to find the oil that really runs this engine.
So this is something that I was in choosing characters. I was trying to figure out what race, what gender. I think the main reason I wanted the just three core to be male is, like I said earlier, like trying to explore male relationships in like a healthy, supportive, more complex way than we usually see, and their roommates as well. But that doesn't mean that they can't have a female roommate. It could be like New Girl, very different show, but same kind of dynamic.
I had a female roommate, and again, I don't want to push you too hard in one direction, but you don't want to have it where it's a bunch of guys talking and interacting all the time. You'll end up shoehorning these other female characters in, is what happens a lot. They'll be there. I'm not saying you won't create them. I'm not saying you were going to really create an alternate world where women didn't exist, but they won't be in the inner core
foundational.
And you'll be trying to get them in, and then if I was actually a show, Jim and I worked on shows where there's so many characters that you are twisting yourself in pretzels to get them in, because really you just want to hang out with your core. Those are the ones that we really attach to.
Well, at the end of this first draft of the pilot, Krish, he recruits or has coffee with a friend of his, Anderson, who is black. They're gender neutral. They're like a community organizer. They are dialed into like small local nonprofits. So I think that's something I want to like make sure is clear, that like not all nonprofits are evil or bad.
Right.
And that they're a lot operating on like a shoestring budget and doing like God's work. And they're also dialed into like local politicians. So that character does come in at the end.
If they come in at the end, that's too late, right? Because this is a pilot and there is no episode 2. Right, that's how we always have to look at it. So you've got an interesting character, although I don't know anything about them yet. But okay, that's different. I would say to you already right away, you could say, what if they knew this person before they transition, and now they're dealing with that, and they don't give a shit. By the way, there's no conflict on that. It doesn't have to be the point of the show.
Or you take these kinds of things you're thinking about as your pilot and throw all that away and start with episode 2, right? And make that your pilot, right? Like the inciting incident of going to a nonprofit fundraiser and running into things that feel out of context, or like someone who's being used or something, that can have been something that already has happened and has set a character in motion who's now bumping into the realities of, wait, but some nonprofits are good, some are bad. What's the repercussions of wanting to upset an apple cart? We haven't gotten that deep into this. I don't know how much upsetting this world affects Hunter's life. I don't know exactly where he fits into it.
We don't know what the stakes are yet.
Right, that's what
they're not defined.
And that's what I'm getting to, right? Is what's the thing you need to have for all of these characters? And I do think you need to bring in a woman. Having someone who's non-binary is great, but I think you do want to represent your core cast, someone who's female.
Yeah.
But within that context, like, why do we care? What is the things on the line for these people, and why are they so passionate about it?
When we say, why do we care, it can't be because they are helping homeless children. That's external. Right. That's not a character thing. If you're saying I want to know, why are they helping these homeless people?
Were they a homeless child?
Yeah.
Then it gets more interesting.
If one of them has an original sin, the rich guy has something that he did that he's making up for, or his family did.
His dad was a developer who wiped out a bunch of affordable housing.
All of these are trite a little bit, by the way, and I'm not saying this is, but this is first idea theater. But what it is it starts to get rid of all this political stuff that I'm worried might freight you down, right? Which is television with an agenda is great. I don't have anything against it. Certainly West Wing had an agenda. But first, Aaron Sorkin figured out these characters. And I could go down the list of those characters and never mention politics once.
Right.
All right, now that we beat you up.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
When we were talking about Hunter prior, I'm curious, is the one need, the one want of like affirmation, of like approval, is that too generous? Is that too vague? And then for Aaron, the guy who works for Big Pharma, like former frat star, his being intimacy, but also like safety.
Wait, hold on. Can we get back to the first guy?
Yeah.
You had an idea for him. What was it?
The wanting affirmation,
Yeah.
but that is a symptom of an issue. That's
a
not
good
an
start.
Actual,
Right.
I know.
Right, yeah.
I'm just saying that's not an actual drive. That's why does he want that? What happened to him? What's his story in life that he needs that?
Needs affirmation. Why is that? Can we, let's spitball on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, at the worst, it's, this character is like somewhat autobiographical, and honestly, like parents that were kind of insecure, and that was passed on to the kid.
Why were they insecure? What about them made them that way?
Drop the autobiographical thing. Let me just say it, because this is this thing that happens a lot. Like in early writing, we all tend to, because we know certain emotional truths about ourselves and the people around us, and it's the first place you go, right? Like you can sort of, why would someone want to do that? Well, why would I want to do that? Or why did my sister want it, or whatever? But you need to take a step back and realize that what you have to do is make your story work, and what your character needs and what drives them to service the story may not be at all the same as what drove you or your own parents, even though it might be similar in some ways.
Or more, maybe
that might be where you start from.
Yeah, and then you're going to make it more extreme.
Yeah, you need to really find it and make it matter to the story.
Yeah. Does that make sense? We're going to tailor the character in this case. We're saying we want to tell a story about this. What character would be good for this kind of story?
Say that this person's father was so tremendously insecure because his father was so successful and wealthy that he felt like, say, he needed to go on Twitter all the time and talk and amass a lot of people who praised him all the time in order to feel any kind of security, even though he himself, a lot of people think he's wealthy and successful, or run for president or something.
So he's
to
not
feel
wealthy.
Successful.
He's not wealthy. Is that where you're going?
No, I was making a Trump parallel of someone who is very insecure, but it looks for outside affirmation because in reality he never has no internal sense of security.
Wow, that's deep. And also the fact that I didn't get that makes me go against my idea that you have to be smart to be a writer.
That's okay. You get smarter over time.
I hope so. So what do you think? What do you think, Adam?
I think I've got a bit to think about.
Well, I mean, let's help you drill into it. So why does he need affirmation? What happened? Any thoughts on that? And by the way, it can be autobiographical. I don't think Jim's saying it can never be that way. It's just saying don't be limited by your experience. We can make it more extreme.
And realize that your own experience might not actually be the right thing once you dig into it, and feel free to change it. Mm-hmm. You may open the door, but you may want to walk into a different room, so to speak.
I think that like the parents both grew up in like poor upbringings, and then were able to get into like a middle class upbringing, but then they're living in like kind of suburban environment in this middle to upper class environment, and they just like constantly do not feel adequate or do not feel like a sense of belonging. Right. And yeah, sure, some people like come out of poverty and like they've got the chip on their shoulder and they've got confidence, but sometimes if their upbringing, if their parents weren't either supportive or if they kind of beat down on them or belittled them, then it's hard to shake that over time.
Can we lean into that for a second? Because I think you're bumping up against something that might be useful for you here. You're talking about a character. You're focusing a show that deals with issues of social injustice and how it is and is not being addressed. Right? That's the sort of the core terrain of this show. And I think by making it about the parents' experiences and their middle class and the kid, I think you need to get rid of that and pretend that this kid he would be the surrogate for, say, your father instead, right? You want someone whose experience of poverty and the insecurity of what it means to step out of that they experienced that directly in some way, the tenuousness of that. You know?
And which led to what?
Well, hold on. But what I want to pitch is...
Oh, wait. So this, if I'm picking you up, sorry for jumping in,
No.
like, if it's more direct and it's more like tangible to Hunter and to this character, then like that's more of a driver for him wanting to seek economic justice and social justice, because he more directly experienced poverty and like kind of the shame that can come with poverty. Am I picking that up?
Yeah, I mean, some way in which it's more directly part of his own experience. You know, I'm thinking of, I know someone who had the experience of getting sort of hands up. You're talking about a guy who we're seeing in the context of all this wealth and money. Here's an example of a background for this character, someone whose parents were maybe not poor or were poor, right? All that, he experienced that, but then say he's really smart or he has some gift that got him into a private school in Manhattan, right? Mm-hmm. Like that. But he's the kid who got the hand up, mm-hmm. right? But he feels a certain imposter syndrome thing going on, right? It's not that he doesn't have the skills, but he doesn't really belong in this world. He's always been kind of an outsider. Nonetheless, here he is moving through the world of philanthropy and nonprofits and this money, and he's somehow facilitating that. He's in a spot where he can see what's going on with it all, but he's looking at the lie around him, and he's had some experience of living that lie. He benefited from hanging around with all these rich people. They've made a place for him in the world, but he doesn't believe it's real, and he looks around and he sees that it's not. These people are justifying themselves. So
that's a lot of backstory, and that's interesting, but I think we still have to go one more step.
Right. I'm just trying to find a context for that, right?
So if he's a guy who feels like he's faking it, like, yes, he has money, but in the inside, he doesn't have class. He didn't grow up with money. All these people, they grew up, they went, skiing weekends, all that kind of stuff, and during spring break, and he didn't do that. So what that could lead to is any number of things, and that's where we get to the character, and just as illustrative of how to peel back a character. So this guy could be super flashy at all times because he's demonstrating his wealth, but he's very angry about it, right? Because he feels he shouldn't have to do this. So he's doing the very behavior that made him angry before, which is demonstrating his wealth. But he does it because he's so angry at these rich people and say, I'm just like you motherfuckers. I am going to be driving this car and this car and that car. And he's angry. And the anger is, now that's a driver for me. Now I can see that he's looking for justice because he feels like he's wrong. Ironically, he's wronging himself in a lot of ways. But that's deep, the deep emotional stuff.
Right, and there's another layer to this. Where is he trying to build up the people who need the help, or is he trying to tear down the people who are nominally giving help because mm-hmm. he feels like they're doing it for bad reasons, or he doesn't like them, he has his own personal agenda with them?
So that's like version 1. Version 2 mm-hmm. would be, this is a guy who's got $40 million in the bank, or $4 million in the bank, or some amount of money, but he lives like a monk. He takes the subway, he walks everywhere, he doesn't own a car, he doesn't this, he doesn't that, because he has these roommates where he could go, but he won't do it because of the damage that he had because he didn't have enough money. So he sees it as evil, but he just keeps making money because he's good at it. So now he's got guilt, and and the only way he can have, he's living the life of this aesthetic because he has so much guilt attached to money. These are all everywhere and nowhere. They may not apply.
Or maybe he's looking for some place to put all of his money. He wants to give it away.
And
that's why he's doing all this. And he finds out he doesn't trust any of these people he's supposed to give his money to.
Right. And now you see how we're trying to dive into this character and figure out version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all coming out of the
absolutely.
circumstances because we're just trying to get a simpler and simpler and simpler answer for who he is. But then what he does is specific to your show, whatever the heck that is. We haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah. So as you were talking about wanting to prove his wealth, or wanting to show look, I've got money too. I like the idea of him not having that much wealth, but him being in this, starting as a production assistant in events in New York. You don't need a college degree, and you can work yourself up. You can become a production coordinator. You become a production manager. You don't need a degree to do that. But the majority of the people you're operating with do have a degree, do come from wealth. And I think that what could be interesting is if he's paying for rounds, he's taking the Ubers to the next bar or whatever, but he just barely has the money to do that. But he feels like he has to in order to prove his status, prove that he's part of this class. And like, he's always kind of just like making it work financially and putting up this charade of being part of this, for lack of a better term, ruling class, when he definitely doesn't have the means to back it up.
So this is fine. This is the good conversation that we can have, but it's still too political. It's still too complicated. And we really got to make this guy a little dumber. And what I mean by dumber is just simpler, simple driver. You can tell me about him in a few sentences.
Once you find your simple core driver, the behaviors that manifest from that drive get infinitely complicated, and they will come out forever in story. But you need a couple of, or really one basic core motivation.
That's right. And the politics of it need to simplify to the nth degree, because politics in and of themselves are not all that, they're not interesting enough to enough of a group.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that politics are, to me, politics are very interesting. We talk about them all the time in my house. But the idea being there's inequity, and there are 3 or 4 people that have a stake in that inequity in various ways, and they set out together to remedy that inequity. That sounds overly simplistic and kind of, old-fashioned television, except once you put on your layers to that, once you add all your specifics to that with these people, it won't sound as trite when you say it, because it isn't. I mean, I could say West Wing is about a bunch of do-gooders get together to change the government. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And then we say, but wait a minute. Actually, it's a family, because they're a family of friends. And most of them are like the dogs that caught the car. Remember, you don't remember, but Toby they're failures. Toby was a failure. He was fired.
Yep.
Right. Josh had worked on, they all came from, say, the minor leagues, except for one guy. And Leo, their father figure. And he brought all these people from minor leagues, and even CJ, who was the spokesperson.
She'd never run a national campaign.
Never run a national campaign, was working for some horrific advertising, or maybe it was public relations in Hollywood. That's what it was. Right. I mean, they were not particularly qualified, but not unqualified. Not as unqualified as the Trump people. Nobody's as unqualified as them. But they were not particularly qualified. And now they had a chance to put up or shut up. And they were in the West Wing. And they did the actual work of governance. And they messed up constantly. And that's the show. And it starts to get more and more interesting.
Right, because the stakes are instantly super high. But we care about them because they're all underdogs. It's a nice match of the biggest possible playing field, most important playing field, and we've got underdogs showing up who we want to root for because we like them as people for various reasons.
Right.
And Sam was saying something about, all these people decide that they want to change the system. I think that's part of the question here, right? If your show is about this inequitable philanthropic world of these nonprofits, is there some way in which the show is actually about all of these people being involved with it? Because if that's just one character's journey, and the one guy's in Big Pharma and the other guy's a public defender, and you do have one person working with local nonprofits, like that's kind of all over the map. That's about people living in New York, right? It's like it's friends with different stories.
I see it differently, though.
But this is what I'm saying is he wasn't pitching that everybody's working in nonprofits.
They don't have to. I thought they were all connected.
Well, but this is what I'm pitching.
Isn't that what Adam was pitching, though?
They're roommates.
So yeah, the log line was that like through this inciting event of like whatever his experience at that nonprofit gala, the friends kind of come together in this sort of like, I guess like Lord of the Rings moment of like, and my axe and my sword of like, this is, we're going to take this on. But they like, they have no idea how much power is behind these organizations and these institutions.
Well, and that's part of the issue is these organizations and these institutions. So if you're saying they're going to take down an institution one a week or one a season, fine. Then but what they are basically the Scooby Gang, in this case, who are going to be working on, they have to be going after one institution. They can't be like, we're going to take on poverty. It can't be, we're going to take on poverty. It needs to be, we're going to open one soup kitchen.
So in this case, are they going to prove this one guy actually is a pedophile
or whatever?
Working supposedly for homeless children.
Maybe bigger than that, because that sounds like one episode, not necessarily a lot. Unless you're saying it's.
Well, it could be a season. I mean, what he was pitching is he's the head of this whole big nonprofit.
Yeah, and they spend 10 episodes taking him down.
Right.
Yeah, that could be cool. Well, what are you thinking now, Adam?
So, and obviously this is just the first draft, but the way this pilot ends is that Hunter, like, after doing great and getting that kid to talk, he got offered a job to like permanently work with this production company that predominantly does nonprofit. And him and his friends decide that like he's going to take that job and he's going to kind of track what's happening there. He's going to track like, you know, when the seating charts get moved and certain people get sat with other people, why is that happening? And like where the money is coming from. Are there connections between the folks at the nonprofit and the vendors that they're using? What's happening in the process?
That's called shoe leather, okay? And shoe leather is valuable, fun, important. There's nothing better than a nice whiteboard where he's saying, look at this, guys. When on Tuesday night, this person sat next to this person, on that person, there this, and then somebody died or this happened. But I have to warn you, it's also kind of boring. It's also the stuff that I have been in writers' rooms where we are killing ourselves to make the shoe leather interesting. Because what we need to know is what is the central problem? One central problem, not how they get there, because you don't have to figure out every step of the way through the whole season. You really don't. You just have to figure out, okay, there is a dirty nonprofit. They are doing this bad thing. And these four people who are kind of ill-suited in many ways to do this are going to try to take these incredibly powerful people down.
And I guess that's what I'm looking for is what's the aha moment in the pilot where whatever he's got involved in this thing and he sees something so egregious that he runs out to tell his friends and they'll go, holy fuck.
Yeah.
We have to put aside everything else in our lives or back burner it to help you slay this dragon because this is a fucking monstrosity going on.
And by the way, that's probably the end of Act 1. That's
ideally.
Yeah, that's probably around page 15 or 20 or something like that, just so we know, okay? And it's got to be simple and understandable and nefarious. And it can't be poverty is bad. And it can't be these people are stealing money from the thing because that's low stakes. That's
like
just
having to encourage the kid to speak up, right? What you were pitching, like he gives them the speech and the kid goes out and gives the speech. That could work in Act 1 if the speech finally happens. Then you find out top of Act 2 that this kid was molested by the guy who runs the nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just helped this guy cover up for his sin. Holy shit, that's what was really going on here. I helped facilitate this shit. Now this has to stop.
right.
Emotionally, I would buy into that story.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel like that's overly simplistic or too TV? You do, don't you? Admit it. Come on, Adam.
No, I mean,
JR does. I'm looking at his face over here.
What?
Like for me, for me, the act of like convincing this kid to do this thing, even though he feels like he's being exploited, and like this kid's about to get up and tell a story about like how his mom was a drug addict and they were homeless for months, and like he's doing this in front of like a bunch of old white strangers. For me, that feels powerful. You know?
That's great. But it's not. It's not a story.
It doesn't drive our characters.
No.
I don't know what makes that be a driver.
I like the fact that he gets up and does it, and in that moment, I get to see how it's a little dirty. You know, that you're making the poor black homeless kid. You know, basically talk about that so you can feel like you've really done something good while you're sitting in your $1,800 shoes and your $4,000 dress and blah 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 blah. So you can give
paying off your guilt.
Right.
Yeah, paying off your guilt. I love that. Hold on. I love that moment. And I love that starts to define your show. It's a great moment, but don't get too attached to it as a plot thing or a story thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Or if that is the flashback about your main character. That was his experience 10 years ago, as he was the kid who wound up the scholarship kid who's now made his way into the world, and now he's looking to poke holes in this philanthropic system that he experienced himself. And even though it got him where he wants to be in the world, he remembers what it feels like to have to be that kid and the self-satisfied smiles of these people eating their steaks and drinking whiskey while they're making the world better for the poor kids.
Right.
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. I'd want to keep it present day, personally, but
I think so as well.
But even so, he could be prepping the black kid to go up there and do it, or it doesn't matter. Let's not get stuck in the details.
That's what it is. That's how the
that's what you're at. But regardless of those
that's how
details,
it plays out. He's like,
let's not worry about that so much. The idea though is we need to understand that this is gross, that somebody doesn't like it. Maybe they they push back and they investigate, or they start to sense something's wrong and they discover that there's rot. They may not know what it is, but and then he brings it to his friends. They have different reactions to it. and they start getting involved. And what that means, that's my overly simplistic thing that is then colored by all their different worlds that they're coming from. And all of
and that
different...
discovery's end of Act 2.
Which discovery? The discovery of
like, what is the rot?
You don't have to know what the rot is. That could be the end of the episode, for that matter.
Okay.
But you don't, or you find out what the rot is. And you find out, that's not the rot, and you find out the real rot at the end of the episode. Those are either one.
Sam was pitching earlier that would be end of Act 1, so that you're putting the gang together at the top of Act 2.
Or trying to,
right? But again, for me, and the reason I was pitching that as a flashback is because it emotionally connects me to the character. The thing that's missing for me here is I don't understand. I understand why the poor kid who's getting up to talk to this room full of people is feeling a certain amount of emotional, like it's dirty. Like, sure, of course I get that. What I don't understand is what about this situation is so jarring or emotional for our main character that he can then carry it to other people and they find it so jarring that it becomes a mission for them to take on what you're pitching. And it's one of those things, like, it's not that there's a balance to what happens in everyday life, and you want things to feel grounded, and there's stuff that definitely feels too TV and all of that. But there's a reason why your story starts today, right? And that's what's missing for me is everything we're talking about here could happen anytime, any place, and it's all sort of general. What is the thing that happens that changes this guy's world and makes him change his friend's world today?
Yeah.
Adam, and the thing is, we're just drilling down. That's all we're doing here. And I know in part of drilling down, we end up tossing stuff that you've thought about a lot to the side.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you're...
this is good. Okay. This is good for me.
Well, when we're done talking, feel free to ignore any or all of this. In fact, I encourage you to.
You'd probably be better off.
But the thing is, it's just about drilling down to those core truths there and then building back up, because you'll find a lot of this stuff is extra. And you'll get your political agenda in there just enough and not too much, right?
Right.
Because then the idea of, because what would be great is this guy is doing a nefarious thing, like the Bradley Whitford, to stay with Josh Lyman, the Bradley Whitford character in Get Out.
Yeah.
He was so great. He voted for Obama twice, or wanted to. And then he loved black people so much, he wanted their bodies. Yeah. That was the moment of genius. He was a different kind of racist, I guess.
Right. He was willing to exploit them.
Yeah.
just admiring them while he does it.
Exploit them. I mean, there are many other. It was just a beautiful, imperfect way. Not imperfect is the wrong word, but it's not trite. It was like, oh no, they love that she has a black boyfriend, and then there's the twist. And the thing is, that's the difference. So the idea, if I told you the idea of Get Out, it would be
spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie that came out 3 years ago. But they are taking the bodies of black people. White people are taking the bodies of black people and putting their consciousness into them so they can be young again, and be strong and be beautiful black people.
Metaphor for American culture.
But the story is just stealing other people's bodies to be young. It's the fountain of youth in the particular way. And that would be the tritest, most boring idea. And then, Jordan Peele spun it up and it became this social commentary. And you have to get down to that essential trite idea first, I think. I know Jim thinks, before you can really spin it up. I want you to know that we tell you this, but we do not do this this way, because I don't think the creative process works that way. We come up with a bunch of stuff just like this and then start drilling down to find it.
Well, and then you find, because once you find the thing, it shines a light, and suddenly you see, like, oh, these 20 things I've thought of are useful. These 45 are not, because they're off the spine of the thing I've suddenly realized speaks most truly to me.
Because they get us somewhere in our creative process. They're the scaffolding, but in the end they got to go. What do you think?
I really, you guys said this a while ago, but I really like the idea of just writing episode 2, because I think right now there's like so much bouncing around my head from what you guys have like shared and provided, which is excellent. And I think I might understand these characters' motives more. I might understand like the trajectory, because fighting injustice in its own is too broad, too ambiguous, not tangible, and I totally understand that. Like looking at a specific nonprofit, at a specific employee in that nonprofit, and like kind of breaking that down and looking at all of that, that's tangible. There are stakes there. That's exciting. Yeah. I think if I were to right now go back and try and work on this pilot, I think I would feel paralyzed. But I think if I were to just turn that page and just kind of rip ahead, I think that would be a lot more beneficial.
Well, you know, Aaron Sorkin is a gifted writer at 100 different levels, but while we're living with West Wing, you didn't get the origin story of the West Wing until the first episode of season 2. That was really kind of the pilot, was episode 1, season 2.
Oh, yeah.
Right, in a lot of ways.
But
instead of trying to set up who are these people, what do they want?
Yeah.
No, he just started and you're in their world and shit's happening, and you're in the White House, and you have to kind of figure it out in episode 1 of season 1. And then you get the deeper understanding later.
Yeah, in episode 1, just to explain what Jim is saying for those people who did not watch West Wing, in season 2, episode 1, that's when we got to see the beginning of the campaign and how they came together,
how they were each recruited to be part of the campaign,
all of that stuff, which could have been a pilot in a way, but I don't. That'll be. But anyway, and it was great that he didn't do that. That we started hot. Everybody's in the White House, and it's early on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So is it not necessary then, in what could be a pilot, to know like what provoked these 4 people to go on this kind of epic or whatever, to like take on this challenge? Is it fine to just begin mid-stride of them doing like on this kind of journey, on this attack, I guess?
There's a lot of different answers to that question, and they are all right. I recently watched the first couple episodes of a series to check it out. And to my mind, they completely did it wrong, because they chose to make the pilot about why everyone is in the situation they're getting into. And it was a downer. It didn't establish the characters well. I knew why they were doing what they were doing. But episode 2 was where they actually arrived in the new situation, where they were going to be confronting the new problems they would be confronting. The stuff that the show is going to live in from that point forward began not until episode 2. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a complete disaster, because episode 1 wound up being, I could have seen in some flashbacks, or even better yet, characters and actors I care about talking to each other about the painful events of the past that put them there.
Yeah.
Everything you could have done in the context of episode 2 would have been much more compelling than what they actually did as episode 1.
It was terrible. And so the thing is, I think you're right. This idea of starting in episode 2, I wouldn't have made sense to me, but it's kind of like that kid's book. Remember that kid's book where you had the moose and everybody, all the birds and the animals all moved into its horns, and he wandered around the episode, wandered around the forest, and his horns were getting heavier and heavier, and they were weighing him down, and he couldn't get anybody to leave, and it was terrible. And then at the end of the episode,
that moose is your pilot.
By the way, this is written by a very neurotic person, but it was probably one of the big ones. But anyway, and then at the end of the book, he sheds his horns, and then he's free, and that is a somewhat cheesy way to express what you're basically saying is you don't want to have all those conversations with yourself. So get rid of all your old ideas and start a little past that. And then I think that's good advice. You do need to at least have a sense why people are doing what they're doing, but you don't have to define it. Some networks, broadcast networks, you do have to define it, and then it gets a little freighted. But if you define it for 1 or 2 of the characters, it's enough, in my opinion. And you get a sense of the other ones, and you know that down the road, you end on the question of why are they doing this? Why is this person doing this? And then if you get enough, like they're hiding something or something happened to them. Yeah,
especially if you get a sense of like there's some dichotomy in it, right? Like, wait a minute, they present like this, but they're doing that. Mm-hmm. Why? Well, if you're asking, that's a great
and that's episode 4.
Right.
We'll get into that.
Quick question: pulling from like national news or stories that happen, what are your thoughts on that? Because there was a couple months ago, there was a CEO of a housing nonprofit in the Bronx who was accused of like nepotism and sexual assault. And it could be really interesting to have a character who's working in that environment and maybe gets sexually assaulted or gets grabbed or
I think it's great.
Whatever it is.
Steal from that 100%.
Yeah, you just have to, make it non-specific enough that you're not libeling anyone.
There's this guy out there somewhere, this producer. I can't quite remember his name. What is it?
Dick Wolf?
Dick Wolf.
That guy. That's his name.
I don't know if he ever made anything of himself, But I know that he set out to do
Never heard of him.
some lame show about
Rip from the headlines? Was
Yeah.
that what it was? Ka-ching! Wait, was that a cash register or a slamming cell door? I don't know which.
Does he have 2 planes or 3 planes? I don't know what it
I
is.
saw his boat up in Santa Barbara last year, and it was pretty damn big.
Yeah. So the short answer is yeah. Steal everything.
Yeah, okay.
Dude, Adam, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck.
This was
Yeah, you
a
guys
lot
as
of fun
well.
to
Thank
break
you.
this down. Really
Enjoy
fun.
the snow.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Enjoy the not snow.
I don't know. Enjoy your free and easy life before
Yeah.
you come back to the real
Thank
world.
you, guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Be
All
well,
right,
man.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
And that's all we've got for you this week. Our producer, J.R. Zamora-Thal, is working the mixing board.
Our logo was designed by Julien Debar-Monclair, and our music was provided by Buddha-Rays out of Austin, Texas.
If you want to get in touch, we are at The Salmon Gym on Instagram and Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook and YouTube as The Writer's Room with Sam and Jim.
And if you like hanging out in the room with us, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And tell a friend, would you, so we can get JR paid. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.